Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Marielle Villeray, Program Development Director for the Office of Academic Initiatives and Strategic Innovation here at the Graduate Center. Thank you for joining us for the third event in the Underscored series of virtual performances, which we've paired with conversations between musicians from the Copland House Ensemble and the Graduate Center Doctoral Program. We're using the Zoom webinar platform today, and I'm going to quickly acquaint you with the Q&A tool so that you can ask questions throughout the program that will be answered during our live talkback. You'll find this tool at the lower panel of your Zoom window. It's an icon that looks like a set of overlapping conversation bubbles labeled Q&A. And if you click on that, a new window should appear in which you type in your questions for the artists. These will be monitored and delivered to the moderator for discussion in the latter half of the program. I'm now going to hand it off to Michael Boriskin, Artistic and Executive Director of the Copland House.
Welcome to Aaron Copland's home. I'm Michael Boriskin, the Artistic and Executive Director of the Creative Center for American Music that is based at this National Historic Landmark. And we're so delighted to have you join Copland House and the Graduate Center of the City University of New York in this next program in our virtual series called Underscored. Each of these programs features one important American work in an introductory conversation and a complete performance of the piece by our Music from Copland House Ensemble, occasionally joined as guest artists by Graduate Center doctoral candidates. Today's program features, underscores, one of the richest and most masterful pieces that Copland ever wrote, the too rarely performed quartet for piano and strings of 1950. It's really a singular piece, perhaps a bit darker and moodier than most of the works in Copland's catalog. It is certainly one of the most intensely expressive of all of his pieces. It's a major statement. He was really aiming high, thinking of, as he wrote, the cultivated listener. That's you. This particular program happens to coincide almost exactly to the day, 70 years after the quartet was premiered in October of 1950. That seems to have been an atypically frantic time in Copland's life because the final score was actually dated October 20th, a bare 9 days before the premiere. And we think of those beleaguered first performers having hardly more than a week to master and digest a really demanding piece of music. Happily, we have had much more time than that. The Copland Quartet has become one of Music from Copland House's signature pieces. We've played it all over the country. We recorded it a number of years ago on CD. We always find it a deeply moving and deeply rewarding experience. We hope you'll feel that way as well. Before we hear our performance, I'm going to be joined in a brief conversation about this really fascinating and striking work by one of Music from Copland House's principal artists, the wonderful cellist Alexis Pia Gerlach, and the historian and Graduate Center Professor Emeritus, John Graziano. So please enjoy the talk, enjoy the performance, and stay with us for the live Q&A afterwards. So I thought we would start with a kind of 40,000-foot view of the Copland Piano Quartet and try to place it in some kind of context among Copland's other works. It's usually the case with artists in any field that their more popular works tend to throw the rest of their catalog into the shade. That's especially the case with Copland, who has written a handful of works that are beyond popular. They are deeply embedded in America's national consciousness, if you will. Emblematic works like Rodeo and Appalachian Spring and Fanfare for the Common Man, which has given us, even at this late date, a kind of narrow view of Copland's accomplishment, his artistic accomplishment, which is really, really very broad across many different genres: symphonic, instrumental, chamber, vocal, even film. Um, Not voluminous, but really a substantial catalog. So, John, maybe we can start with how you think the Piano Quartet, which was written in 1950, relates to other works he's written around that time on either side of it in the 40s and the 1950s.
Sure. I think that this piece was a commission from Elizabeth Sprague Coolidge. It was intended to be part of a festival at the Library of Congress. And I think Copland decided to write something more experimental than what people were aware of from the pieces around it. Just before this piece, we have the Third Symphony, which was received good notices when it was premiered. And then we have the Emily Dickinson songs written in 1950 and the Old American songs, both sets of the Old American songs, and the Clarinet Concerto. So those are the immediate major pieces around the quartet. The quartet itself is written in a much more dissonant style than almost any of those other pieces. And it harkens back to the piano variations and looks forward maybe to connotations, which he wrote for the opening of Lincoln Center.
Right. And I mean, the Piano Quartet in particular really stands apart from Copland's catalog in general. I mean, not only to the works that you just mentioned, the Third Symphony, which is a big, grand, soaring piece, and the Clarinet Concerto, which was written for Benny Goodman, and so is a very jazzy piece. And the Dickinson songs, which you mentioned, are so exquisite and really homespun. I mean, the Piano Quartet is a special and different piece in terms of the kind of more somber, mellow, even darker kind of, golden lyricism about it. Alexis, we've played the Piano Quartet a number of times with our Music from Copland House ensemble. I wonder if, well, I don't know if it was your first time playing the piece with us, but what was your initial impression? Had you heard the Piano Quartet before you played it? Were you aware of it? And whether you were or not, I mean, getting into it for the first time, what did you think about this piece?
Yeah, I was not familiar with it. I had never played it, and it was not in my ears. It's not a piece that I grew up hearing. I really grew up hearing Appalachian Spring. I will tell you that big time. I grew up in New York City, and we went often to the Martha Graham Dance Company performances, and I saw and heard Appalachian Spring there a lot. And so I had that in my just bank of sound worlds my whole life practically. So approaching this piece, starting off, I actually the opening. I actually think of late Beethoven slow movements, string quartet. slow movements, like Beethoven, with these very sparse lines, one at a time entering. And there's a kind of melancholy and nostalgia and just very classical counterpoint. And then other music that is extremely rhythmic and which really feels so much to me like Appalachian Spring, and that also the sound of the piano also from Appalachian Spring in this piano quartet again has that just springy and buoyant and lively and really dance-like character to it. So this music is very evocative to me. It almost tells a story. I see places and it yeah. So it's full of meaning and feeling. It feels very Aaron Copland to me.
It's interesting, but it's kind of a different aspect to Copland, isn't it? Just because of the sort of somber quality to it. I mean, this isn't particularly. I'm sorry, go ahead.
It certainly has somberness, but there's also a lot of really buoyant, lively, rhythmic, dance-like music.
Second movement,
So, yeah. So, but it to me there's sort of an arc to the piece. It starts quietly and sparsely, and it ends that way as well. I almost see a day go by, the dawn and things light up, and then the end and things fade away. So yeah.
Well,
For sure.
I think it's interesting that Copland, in an interview, said that the quartet was intended for a cultivated listener.
Which is precisely describing our viewers today.
Yes, I hope.
John, you had mentioned to me when we were talking a bit about this that the piece differs from what many would expect from a piano quartet, and I wonder what you were getting at with that. Could you expand?
Sure. I think that when one thinks of piano quartets or chamber music in general, we think of 3 or 4 movement pieces that start with a fast movement, usually in sonata form, and then either a scherzo-like movement or a slow movement. They alternate with the second and third movements, and then a fast movement again, a rondo maybe in Mozart, or a theme and variations in Brahms or in Schumann or even in Fauré. And I think what we see, what is surprising here is that Copland decided to write a piece that was starting with a slow fugue in the first movement, and it continues in an adagio, serio tempo, a fast second movement, and then again a slow third movement.
Well, that's an interesting point that you make, that Copland sort of flips or turns inside out that more traditional succession of movements, of large chamber works, piano quartets or quintets, or even trios, of starting with something that tends to be fast and ending with something fast, and then something that is slower and more lyrical in the middle, and maybe something a little bit lighter for like a diversion. Copland, as you correctly said, his framework is slow, fast, slow, which is actually something that he often did, not only in his chamber works, but in some of the other instrumental and symphonic works. And it seems to sort of naturally follow the sort of compositional rhetoric of his starting with an idea and expanding it, letting it develop slowly and become very complex and intense in the middle and involved. And then it sort of disappears towards the end into something that's very quiet. That seems to me to be that something pretty typical of the way Copland wrote, and it really follows on a grand scale the way he always said that he went about composing. He often said that he liked to start out with ideas, musical ideas that, as he said, were pregnant in possibilities, and gave him the opportunity to develop them, and sort of doing that over a large arc that grew from nothing and started slowly and got more involved and then disappeared and wrapped up at the end was, a perfect analog to his larger, approach to writing. Alexis, I just wanted to go back to what you were saying for a second about your having not really known the piece when you first played it, and it struck me, and still does. I am endlessly surprised at how many of our colleagues, highly accomplished, highly experienced performers, not only have not played the Copland Piano Quartet, but don't even know that it exists some 70 years after it was written. And we're talking about a composer who was anything but obscure, especially in America. What gives with that? Why do you think that is?
I truly don't know. I don't have a good answer for that. It's dumbfounding. It's such a beautiful piece of music, and there's such variety in it. It has such character. It's so effective, and it's also so different from any other piano quartet that I can think of. I mean, really. It doesn't make sense to me that it's hardly even known among chamber musicians. I mean, it's very odd. I can't explain it.
It's one of the mysteries of the music world, and we're going to hear the piece now. And so maybe everyone viewing, collect your thoughts about this mystery. Why such a rich, masterful, and, as Alexis said, gorgeous piece, moving piece, still resides on the periphery of the repertory. This is music from Copland House performing this piece at Elabash Hall at the Graduate Center. The violinist is Paula Garcia from the Graduate Center doctoral program. The violist is one of our principal artists for music from Copland House, Danielle Farina. Alexis is the cellist, and I'm the pianist. Please collect up your questions as you hear the performance, and your comments. There's a very neat little button at the bottom center of your screen, which will allow you to type in your questions. Stay with us after the performance when we will have with you a live Q&A. We look forward to hearing what all of you have to say. We thank you for joining us. Enjoy the performance. We'll see you later. Well, what a beautifully crafted and really breathtaking piece that is the Copland Piano Quartet. Thank you all so much for joining with us and for staying with us now on this Q&A. A reminder that there is a neat Q&A button at the bottom center of your screen. And we're eager to get as many questions as we can in the very short amount of time that we've got. But we'll get started right away. I just want to mention that this whole program is being recorded, and as soon as it is closed captioned, it will be posted on YouTube and on the CUNY Graduate Center website and the Copland website, and possibly a couple of other places. So you will be able to see it again. I am so thrilled to be joined with my friend and colleague Alexis Gerlach, who played so beautifully in the quartet. Hello. And John Graziano from the Graduate Center. So we've got terrific questions here. And maybe we'll start, John, with a question from Joel about why Copland adopted the 12-tone system in this piece. And I just want to caution that we're not going to get too deep into the weeds, and we're not going to get too technical. This is not going to transition into a music theory seminar. But just to say that the 12-tone composition, serial composition, was one of the pioneering and foundational compositional tools of composers throughout so much of the 20th century. John, do you have any thoughts about it?
Well, yeah, I think that by 1950, a number of composers were moving away from the tonal Americanist style of music that was written in the 30s and into the 40s. Roger Sessions, for example, became much more dissonant. Roy Harris became more dissonant. William Schumann particularly became more dissonant. And Stravinsky started playing with the idea of 12-tone music, possibly because of Robert Kraft and Schoenberg. And so Copland saw this, and I think he decided that this would be a great place to do it because it was for an audience. It wasn't a big piece for an audience in a big concert hall, but rather it was a chamber music piece where the audience would accept it more readily.
It's a really intimate work, which of course doesn't preclude it from being a really very dramatic and very intense. Stuart here has made a very interesting comment that probably the reputation of this piece as being 12-tone has maybe been worked to the piece's detriment in terms of its being it's having entered a more mainstream repertory. We had been talking earlier about how this piece remains relatively infrequently played. Even a lot of musicians don't know it. And Stuart talks about the piece quite correctly. I think we'd all agree in being as expressive and as cohesive as anything that Copland wrote. I just wanted to add to what you said, John, that I think Copland was exceptionally receptive to all kinds of outside creative stimuli. And that was something that he, that stayed with him throughout his life. At various points in his life, he really tried different kinds of musical idioms, starting in the 20s as a young man, coming out of a kind of Francophile period. He loved French music and French art, but in wanting to create an American music, an American sounding idiom, he in the 20s turned to jazz, and then in the early 30s turned to early modernism, and then in the 30s and 40s the musical populism that he is probably best known for, with pieces like Appalachian Spring and Rodeo. And then, as you said, around in the 1950s, turning back to 12-tone music, which he played around with in the 20s. So he was always reaching into different areas to sort of refresh his music. There's an interesting multi-part comment and question, which I'm going to put to Alexis, from Kevin, who I know to be based in Great Britain, and who runs a wonderful Copland website and blog that you should check out. Kevin has asked about the physicality of this piece. How does the quartet compare to other works that you've played in terms of physicality, Alexis? He also wants to know if we've ever worn fitness monitors to see how many calories we use during such a piece.
It's funny. I mean, I don't think of this piece as being especially just physically exhausting to play, like, Shostakovich Piano Trio or something like that. But there is a real range of types of concentration in it. And the slow music just has this sustained intensity and just concentration of focus, and that then contrasts very much with the middle movement, which is, in addition to enjoying the playfulness and delightfulness of it, I mean, talk about concentration. The counting is nuts. If anybody, looking at the music, I was actually following my part as I was listening just now, and rarely do downbeats on the page correspond to what might sound like a downbeat in the music. It's very, very confusing. But we do have to switch gears very, very quickly between types of concentration between the movements. But that's something that we, I think musicians are accustomed to. In fact, in pieces where there are different movements, the moods are often completely different from one another. But
you anticipate another part of Kevin's question / comment, which is, if you find it hard to shift gears from the energetic driving middle movement to the more elegiac finale, that gorgeous finale, is there some physical or mental challenge involved for you in so changing gears that way? He talks about a biathlon where you finished swimming and then you have to slow down to shoot.
Yes, right. Well, there is this moment after the second movement where, almost like an actor becoming a new character, we have to transform internally, really. Yeah, so I would imagine it could be similar to going from running a marathon to, I don't know, shooting bow and arrow or something where you have to be absolutely steady. Yeah, but we do take a moment to completely change gears and enter this new world.
Totally. I think he asked about the fitness monitor. I don't know if I would if I would need a fitness monitor, I think what would be more interesting would be something to monitor brain waves.
Yes, that
Because
would be
in a piece like this, I think our brains are going, shifting into overdrive, whether the music is fast or slow, energetic or really reflective. Unfortunately, we've got time only for one more question. And just want to find it here. Larry has wondered about whether the piano quartet is more obscure to professional musicians than something like Vitebsk, which is Copland's early piano trio, a very dark and gritty portrait of a poor Jewish ghetto in Russia. I don't know about that. If I can jump in on that, John, I wonder if you have any thoughts about it. Vitebsk certainly seems to be played much more than the piano quartet.
Yes, I think part of that is that people are put off by the idea that this is 12-tone, though the 12-tone aspects that Copland uses are very, very different from Schoenberg and Webern. They're closer to what Ernst Krenek does in his music, where he combines and does other things. I mean, just the fact that we hear Three Blind Mice in the last movement, it tells us that we're not listening to traditional 12-tone music. But I think part of it is that it ends so quietly. It's a piece that's very hard to figure out where one programs it normally. I don't think you can do it before the intermission. Maybe it's the first piece after the intermission, and then you end with something upbeat, as it were.
Well, we're different at Copland House. We find ways to program such pieces. Anyway, we could go on easily for another half hour, but we're going to have to bring this to a quick close. I just want to mention two things very quickly, aside from thanking you again for joining us. We will be back here on November 9th. Monday, November 9th at 1 p.m. Alexis and I are going to be giving the digital premiere of a new sonata for cello and piano that John Musto, the Graduate Center professor, has written for us. We look forward to seeing you for that. It's a terrific piece, just written. We're excited to do it here. There's also going to be a survey that will be sent to you. Please fill it out and feel free to comment. It'll help us as we continue to build our underscored program. Thank you again for joining us, and we hope to see you on November 9th and look for this program being posted again. Thanks.